Long ago, in ancient Rome, there were many different kinds of people living together. There were a lot of people, and they all had different jobs to help their city work well. But most people didn't have many choices for their jobs. Usually, only rich or important families could pick from the best jobs. Jobs like leading the army or working in the government were only for the most important people. On the other hand, regular people did all sorts of jobs to make a living. Also, the Roman Empire used a lot of slaves to help them, and rich people could own up to 500 slaves. These slaves had to do hard and not so nice jobs that were not respected. They did things like farming, building, and housework. But some slaves who were taught well could do jobs like being a doctor, a teacher, an accountant, or even an artist. There were also some really strange jobs in ancient Rome that even the slaves might find weird. In this exploration, we'll talk about some of these interesting and unusual jobs from that time. Our journey starts with a job that existed back then and still exists today: astrologers. Just like people nowadays go to astrologers to predict their futures using horoscopes and tarot cards, ancient Romans had their own version of this job. These people were called Polaris, and they were like interpreters of chicken behavior. Special military chickens were used to predict the outcomes of battles. The Polaris would watch how the chickens ate corn, whether they ate it neatly, messily, or didn't eat it all, and they would use this to guess what might happen in the battle. Even though this might sound strange, it's similar to what astrologers do now, so it's not too weird when we look at the bigger picture. Another interesting job in ancient Rome was that of the nomenclator, which means name-caller in simpler terms. Nomenclators had one main job: to remember the names of all the people at parties or events. This job had two purposes. First, it stopped people from feeling embarrassed when they couldn't remember names. Second, it was a way for politics. People running for public office had nomenclators with them. These nomenclators would loudly say the names of people coming close to the candidate. This made the candidate look smart and respectful. Moving on, let's talk about funeral clowns. In ancient Rome, there were people who acted like the person who had died at funerals. They would copy the things the dead person did, sometimes even the funny or strange things. While it might sound strange to make jokes when someone has died, this actually gave a little moment of happiness and laughter for the people who were sad. This tradition, though different, shows how we can celebrate someone's life even when they are no longer with us. There were people in ancient Rome who had a job to pluck out armpit hairs. These people worked in bathhouses and used tweezers to remove armpit hairs for the customers. Even though this might sound similar to modern grooming, the fact that it happened in public places and as part of a social event makes it a bit unusual. Next, there were slave managers called vicarii. These slaves were like middle managers, and they supervised other slaves. This job was complicated because some vicarii could save money and eventually buy their own freedom. Even though the structure and interactions among the slaves are interesting, the fact that slavery was involved still makes this job difficult to think about. There was a job in ancient Rome that might seem funny and shocking: the Roman orgy planner. These planners were in charge of setting up big parties where people would do things that are considered private, like having sex. They took care of everything, like food, drinks, and entertainment. These parties had a lot of unrestricted sexual activities, and the planners made sure the guests had fun. But these sort of parties were frowned upon from the lower class, maybe because they weren't invited. Even though this job might make people curious and uncomfortable, it shows how the ancient Romans liked to have their fun. In ancient Rome, there was a job called the Staircorius, or excrement collector. This person had the unpleasant job of collecting human waste from cesspools and taking it outside the city. They had to gather waste using buckets and then transport it away. Even though it's not a nice job, it was important in a society where sanitation wasn't very good. Another odd job was the urine tax collector. In the Roman Empire, people valued urine for its useful chemicals. This job involved collecting urine from public restrooms to get these valuable substances. Emperor Vespasian started this tax and famously said, "Money does not stink." While taxing urine might sound strange, it shows how the ancient Romans found ways to make money from different resources. Our list ends with the role of a whipping boy. In the past, there was a practice where a whipping boy would be punished instead of a prince when the prince did something wrong. The idea was to make the prince feel bad about the punishment and try to make him behave better. The goal was to make the prince and the whipping boy become close, so the prince would learn from it. Even though this idea might seem harsh and strange, it shows how societies used to go to great lengths to teach and shape their future leaders. But that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.